It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and, of course, Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. And, of course, you can get the RealAg Radio podcast wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of those whoop-de-doo apps. You can find us there. Hey, today it is Monday, which means agronomics. We're going to be digging into a number of different agronomic issues today on the show on Agronomic Monday. Of course, Peter Pete Johnson will be with us here today to discuss a number of different issues. We're coming up against there's a seeding to unseeded deadline coming up here in June 14th in the province of Ontario. I know he wants to talk about that. We're also going to talk about fusarium head blight and trying to deal with a very shrinking spray window when it comes to some of these crops. I'm hearing this from the audience in Western Canada as well as Central Canada and Eastern Canada. Some real challenges out there. And I'm looking here in Lethbridge, Alberta, a bit of a windy week. Hard to get any spraying done in a week like this. It does make things very, very challenging. We're going to hear from Farming Smarter. They've got their field school coming up here very, very shortly at the end of June. We're going to hear about some of the big changes that Farming Smarter is making for that event, going from 1 to 2 days. And there's camping involved now too. Wow, throwing all the good stuff together into one weekend. So we'll hear about that in a little bit. We're also going to hear from a recent Canola School episode. Kelvin Hepner of Real Agriculture chatted with Ian Epp. They're talking about Kochia resistance. And, of course, this is an ever-growing problem on the Western Canadian prairies. It's challenged big time. It used to be in a real small pocket. The acreage has expanded. What are some of the things you have to do to steer through it? And best management practices and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to hear from Ian Epp of the Canola Council. We'll also have some time today for the top ag news stories of the day. Now, if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you for sure. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also, of course, find us across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the Real Ag Feedback line, 855-776-6147. You know, I saw an article in the Globe and Mail this morning, and I was like, yeah, no kidding. It sort of like hit a bit of a nerve. So it was written by Canola School, and the title is, "With so much technology in cars, why can't the screen show me what the check engine light means?" And I think if you take out cars and you put in tractor, we could probably have the same bit of discussion. So we'll just read off the top here and kind of give you a bit of a flavor for it. So Mr. D'Souza writes, "An illuminated check engine light on your vehicle's dashboard can ruin your plans or at the very least cause doubt about the roadworthiness of your car." Yeah, like, for example, it goes off and it's sort of like, oh my goodness, do I have to go to the dealership now? Or is it just sort of like you get a bit of a tire pressure sensor problem on the right front tire, right? There's a huge wide swath and you have no idea what the problem is. So the story continues. "It usually means a trip to the dealer for a diagnostic test that can cost more than $100. For that, a technician will plug your car into their computer to read the error codes. Sometimes the problem may be something simple and easy for a driver to fix, like, say, a loose gas cap, for example. Other times, the light could be a warning sign for some sort of costly repair." Which got me to wondering, with infotainment systems becoming more advanced, why isn't there an app or user-friendly diagnostic tool to tell you on the large screen what's wrong with your car, potentially saving you time and money? Or is this all just a conspiracy to force drivers to go to a mechanic or dealers? As it turns out, cars have the ability to tell you what's wrong with them, and they've had it for a long time. But the system is not intended for the general public because specialized equipment is required to read this information stored within a car's computer, and it is often encoded. Ha, ha, ha. So I encourage you to go to that story at the Globe and Mail. Does make you kind of wonder. And I think farmers have that same sort of frustration when it comes to things like tractors as well. Apparently, D'Souza says since 1996, all cars and light trucks sold in the United States and Canada have an onboard diagnostics connector under the dashboard. It's a 16-pin connector that you can plug a code reader or diagnostic tool into. This is the port that technicians use to read the codes stored in the car's computer. You can buy a cheap code reader online and it will retrieve the codes, which you can then Google to find out what the heck they mean. Interesting stuff. This all kind of fits under the right to repair. And yeah, there should be like, when the light comes on, there should be like this, like, blinking green means like it's a tire pressure sensor or like your gas cap is off, like something small like that. And then like the colors change like to sort of yellow and more like a more amber and like, and if it's really bad, it's like blinking red. We need more of that, more context than just a light coming on and saying check engine. It is kind of frustrating, especially when you got to pay for that service and go get it checked out. I think we can all agree on that. And I know farmers share that same sort of error code frustration when it comes to things like tractors as well. Send me your feedback on that. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Okay, when we come back, Wheat Pete's going to join us, and we're going to get to a whole bunch of issues. He's out scouting fields. I got him in his truck, and he'll join us right after this.
Want a product that will give you nitrogen all season long? Then you want to try Envita. Envita gets directly into the cells of the plants, and it's easy to apply, foliar or in furrow. Envita provides the flexibility you need for your farm practices. Whether you want to reduce your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain your nitrogen and increase yield, Envita fits your farm. Envita SC formulation is OMRI registered. To learn more about Envita, visit azotic.com. That's AZOTIC.com.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney at realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other RealAg personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. Now, we got lots to chat about, and we're joined right now by Pete Johnson, who is sitting out in his truck in a field doing some road scouting. Are you, Pete?
No, I'm walking field, Shaun, but I didn't think you'd appreciate me walking and out of breath while we did radio.
Yeah, nothing like some heavy breathing from Wheat Pete Johnson. Hey, Pete, Ag Zone Bin Logic is a grain monitoring solution designed to transform the way growers manage their grain storage. With streamlined installation, subscription-based pricing, and adaptability to your farm's needs, speak to your local co-op agro center expert today about Ag Zone Bin Logic and see how we can help you protect your yields. Okay, like I said, I am making fun of the fact that you have been scouting outside of your truck. I can verify that. Hey, Pete, what are you seeing in the fields as you're walking out and about?
Yeah, so there's a number of things, Shaun, that growers need to be aware of. One is, well, to start with, there's lots of acres that are not seeded in Ontario, and so unseeded acreage benefit starts to get talked about with Agricor. So if you're planning on planting corn, it's now June 10th. The deadline is June 15th. Call Agricor, let them know, and you got to make a decision which way you go. But after June 15th, if you plant corn, you don't get production insurance anymore. You would get the unseeded acreage benefit. So that's one thing. Slug pressure is extremely high, and it makes sense. It's a cool, wet spring. We've had great wheat weather. Growers are trying hard to have more residue on the surface. because it's good to prevent erosion. It's better for soil health. But guess what? Slugs on corn? Yeah, you see the damage. It's almost never an issue. It's just a little bit of leaf feeding. Slugs on soybeans, they eat the growing point as it comes above the ground and that plant is dead. And so there's actually some replants because of the slug pressure that we're seeing out there in the field. And then I'm starting to walk wheat fields again. And guess what, Shaun? And I tweeted out earlier today a picture. Fusarium is rearing its ugly head in the wheat crop, even where we've done every management option that we had to do. And it's a Fusarium year. Again, wet, cool, good wheat weather is generally good Fusarium weather.
And you got any good news today? So far, all you've talked about is stuff going wrong. You got some good news for us today?
Yeah, for sure. The hay yields have been incredible. The corn that's in looks excellent. There's some early corn, some sweet corn that I understand is coming into tassel on the 10th of June. We've had strawberries for 2 weeks. There's lots of good, Shaun. There's all sorts of good out there. Unfortunately, growers rarely call me in when it's good news. Mostly I get called in because there's a problem.
Yeah.
And
hey,
and
Pete,
by the way,
come and look at this great crop I have. You don't hear a lot of that.
Yeah, do that more often, would you? The problem is I rarely have time to look at the great crops as well, unfortunately. And by the way, Shaun, a great crop, keep managing it, but that's not where you have to do the added management. That's why we talk about the problems, because there's management things that we have to apply.
You know, this is an issue in central Canada. This is an issue in Western Canada, where we've been talking a lot about planting and seeding time converging on spraying in that window. And one of the things I've been hearing a lot from the audience is wind. Frustrating when we are seeing increased moisture, which is great, especially from a Western Canadian perspective. But people are trying to get out and spray, and the wind is not necessarily cooperating. It can be a frustrating time sitting in that sprayer seat at the edge of the field, just waiting for that wind to drop.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, it's jamming us back on spraying corn. The corn is getting bigger than the label to apply that particular herbicide. We're having to switch some herbicides to go to different products that we can spray at a larger stage of corn. It's also pushing herbicide spraying and fusarium timing on the wheat, because the wheat is super early. The corn got planted timely to late. And so now those two windows of application are right on top of each other. And that means that there's some T3 sprays, some fusarium sprays not getting applied on time. I've had 3 calls or emails already today just about how late can I apply that T3 fungicide and still get benefit, because we simply haven't been able to get there. And so, wind has been a big issue. The amount of times that it's just showering here in Ontario, we've had lots of these. Well, Saturday was just the perfect day, or the perfect example of that. The sun would shine, it would rain. It would sun and rain at the same time, if that's possible. It did. We had sun showers. It probably rained 6 times or more on Saturday. And how do you spray in conditions like that? It never really rained a lot, but it just kept little showers. Yeah, it was just brutal.
Last week, there was a lot of head turning when it came to the USDA crop progress report. Significant amount of the U.S. corn crop in good to excellent shape, 75%. It's a very strong number. That U.S. corn crop's off to we're going to hear about soybeans today, but the U.S. corn crop off to a fantastic start.
Yeah, not the case here in Ontario. We are going to have a significant number of corn acres not planted, but that's just adds to the stress or the frustration, because U.S. corn in good shape, the markets go down. You have corn in the ground that isn't maybe perfect. You pushed it a little bit on soil conditions, or you haven't even got the crop in the ground and the price is going down. It's like, really? Like, I'm going to have less crop to sell and no price to sell it at. That's a challenge.
Yeah, it's early. We'll see what happens there. But it is It is early. Now, you've been getting, you mentioned fusarium, and definitely a concern, central eastern Canada, also in the west. But you've been getting some comments and questions from the audience related to the FHB1 gene. Talk about that and some of the you want to clarify some of the misconceptions out there.
Yeah, so some of the new genetics have the FHB1 resistance gene in the genetic package, and we can tell that now with the tracing that we can do from a genetic perspective, and it's a real tool. But some growers have this concept, and even some agronomists, that, oh, I have FHB1 in that variety, so I don't have to worry about fusarium. I shouldn't see any fusarium. FHB1 confers resistance to spread in the head. So normally you get one infected spikelet, and then the fusarium moves down in the head and can infect other spikelets. With FHB1, it really limits or stops the amount of that spread, but it doesn't do anything to initial infection, and it doesn't do anything to dawn accumulation. Dawn accumulation, the toxin that we get in the wheat crop, is totally unrelated to this FHB1 or even the FHB2 genetics, which is if you have or type 1 type 2 type if you have the type 2 genetics, that's FHB1. It's a little confusing. That's the spread. Type 1 resists initial infection, but dawn accumulation is unto itself again. It's different genes all over again. And so it's such a complicated disease. Just because you have FHB1, you will still see initial infection. It's an extremely high pressure year. So you could get a ton of initial infection. It's possible the whole head could go just from initial infection. It's highly improbable, but it still can happen. And it's still possible you could have high toxin levels in that crop, even with FHB1. So don't take your foot off the pedal. Make sure that you apply that fungicide. If you get late, right up till day 8, we know there's good benefit with the fusarium fungicides, maybe to day 10. After that, we start running into pre-harvest interval issues. And so we typically say past day 10, we have to pull the plug on applying those fungicides. But just, you can't take your foot off that gas pedal, Shaun, even with FHB1.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Same thing. It sort of reminds me of with canola varieties. There was, some sclerotinia resistant or highly tolerant varieties, and you can't leap to, I never have to spray.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And pyramided resistance. That's the other thing. What we'd like to see is varieties that have both type 1 and type 2 resistance, because then we would have resistance to initial infection and the spread. And then resistance to dawn accumulation would be great. And maybe now that we can edit genes without having to jump through a lot more hoops, right? The whole CRISPR Cas9 gene editing decision, we hope that's a real benefit down the road.
Got an email from a listener from no name attached, but I believe from North Dakota. We were talking about stripe rust last week, and we need to clarify some of the BMPs when it comes to stripe rust in that Northern Plains region. Yeah, so the caller or the person that sent the email said that I said you don't have to worry about stripe rust in that North Dakota, South Dakota, Western Canadian area. And if I said that, bad wheat, Pete, bad. Do not say that, because it's not right. Absolutely. We always worry about stripe rust, because if it comes in early, you can lose 50% of your yield. What I should have said, and what I hope I said, is that we haven't seen it in Western Canada yet, and that was true last week. This particular email said they found it now in the Dakotas, so we knew it was coming. It's here. Worry about it. If you have a susceptible variety and it's in the area, go spray a fungicide. I'm pretty much to that point. That you have to manage for stripe rust right up until heading or even after heading. A pest that we frequently hear about in Western Canada, cutworm. It can be brutal when it comes to some of the crops that we're growing. I think of canola right away, for sure. But we've got some issues with cutworms when it comes to Northern Ontario.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting some emails from Northern Ontario with, it looks like dingy cutworm. And so dingy cutworm was actually there last fall. It overwinters its larva and it lives, or it's native to the area, and it is wiping stands out. Oof. Both barley stands, canola stands, people having to replant. If you have it there, you can control it. If you can get out there early enough. They're nocturnal feeders. They're leaf feeders. They're not like black cutworm that clip the stem off below the growing point and kill it. They feed on the above ground leaf tissue. So if you can get there early enough, you can actually control them, but just tremendous pressure, way more than than we've seen for a long time, I guess is the way I should say that.
Did you say dingy cutworm?
Dingy? Yeah, dingy cutworm.
It's like dive bar cutworms.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just the name of it. There's glassy cutworm, there's black cutworm, there's variegated cutworm, there's many cutworms.
Yeah. Yeah. Hosting the Pest and Predator podcast, I have learned over the years that there are many, many different types of some of these, common pests that would be like, throw cutworm or beetle. You got to be careful, right? Some good, some bad. So
yep.
It's
actually the majority good, but we only talk about those few bad ones because the bad ones are the ones that we have trouble with.
Yeah, there's too many of those. Too many bad ones.
Yes, absolutely.
So what else does Wheat Pete have on tap this week? What are you doing? Just out scouting fields?
Scouting fields. Of course, we have the agribusiness breakfast meetings. John Kavorsky is going to join the Northern breakfast meeting from Saskatchewan because it's virtual to talk about cutworm. So that's going to be cool. We'll get the export.
John Kavlowski.
Yes, Kavlowski. Sorry. Absolutely. So we have that set up. So that's kind of cool. We're going to the other agribusiness breakfast meetings. We'll be talking about unseeded acreage benefit because lots of questions there. Wheat Pete's word. And beyond that, Shaun, that's about all. That just seems to be enough for this time of year. Meeting season starts next week, not this week. Meeting season starts again next week.
Well, no rest for the wicked this time of the year. Hey, Pete, thanks a lot for joining us here this week. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Shaun. Anytime. Have a great week yourself.
Absolutely. And make sure everybody you download this week's episode of Wheat Pete's Word. New episode drops every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today. Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight with Farming Smarter that is based here out of Southern Alberta. And we're joined right now by the assistant manager with Farming Smarter. It is Jamie Puchinger. Hey, Jamie, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. Okay, Jamie, what are the big highlights here in Southern Alberta during the growing season is the Farming Smarter Field School. But there's going to be a little bit of a difference this year, some changes. What's different about this year's Field School?
Yeah, this year we decided to make it a little bit longer. So we're going to have 2 days with 2 different agendas each day. So people can come to one or both days and benefit. We're also going to have an indoor and outdoor trade show, which we've never really tried before. We've added lots of time for social sort of networking time. We have a licensed beer garden, lots of fun that way. And we're also going to allow on-site camping for the long weekend.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Mixing in camping and networking with a chance to also brush up on some of the latest and applied research as well. So why did you make these changes?
Well, every year we want to sort of reevaluate what we do and why we're doing it and how we can make it better. And we wanted to create a bigger event that would draw more interest and excitement and create an opportunity for folks outside of Southern Alberta potentially to join us as well.
Well, I know that there's a number of farmers that have been going to the field school every year. But for some of our listeners that have not been before, or it's been a while, who gets the most out of this event? Like who should be thinking about attending?
Really anyone that's involved in agriculture. We have something for everybody, whether you're just working on a farm at the farm level, or if you're a farm manager, a farm owner, if you work in industry or sales or some other related industry to agriculture. There's always the networking opportunity in addition to the agronomy related information. And then we just try and put on a really good event with really great food and have a good time.
Yeah, it's a big part of it, right? You got to have fun too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What can people expect to learn about from the education component?
We have lots of really great sessions this year. As I mentioned, the agenda for each day is different. So we've got a total of 11 different presenters, people that are ranging sort of throughout the different topic areas. And for example, we've got irrigation focused sessions. So one on irrigation management and one on crop water use with Philip Harder and Lynn Hingley. We have some sprayer and spray technology type stuff. Tom Wolf is coming. Ken and Mike are putting on a spray water quality presentation. We also have the See and Spray technology that's going to be showcased here, as well as fertility and systems-based approaches with Brian Barris and Regis Karamana. So lots of really great sessions, something for everybody for sure.
It does sound awesome. Okay, now, again, you mentioned the long weekend. When is this taking place, and how do people find out more and even register for it?
Yeah, so the event will run June 26th and 27th, which is the Wednesday, Thursday before July long weekend. We can have camping starting here on the 25th, and they can stay till July 1st, like I said, at no charge. Information for registration for the field school is online, and if anybody's interested in the camping, just connect with our office, 403-317-0022.
Hey, great stuff. Jamie, thanks a lot for joining us here today on RealAg Radio, and best of luck at this year's event. It sounds like some great changes, and it should be another stellar year of the field school.
Thanks, Shaun. We're looking forward to it.
We'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and Prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
One of the greatest menaces that we have on the Western Canadian prairies is resistant kochia. And in a recent Canola School episode, Kelvin Hepner of Real Agriculture had a chance to catch up with Ian Epp. He's with the Canola Council of Canada. The Canola School is brought to you by BSF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. Let's listen to Ian and Kelvin's discussion.
And what to do if weeds, especially kochia in particular, don't die when they're expected to as part of this Canola School episode. I'm Kelvin Hepner, and pleased to be joined once again On the Canola School by Ian Epp, agronomy specialist with the Canola Council of Canada, based at Blaine Lake, Saskatchewan, covering the central and northern growing areas of the province. And Ian, to start, what do we know about the prevalence of resistant kochia across Western Canada?
Glyphosate-resistant kochia, it's been around for a while, spreading pretty rapidly. I think if I would describe the prevalence now, I would assume you have it. Unless you're very confident or have done some testing, it's probably the safe assumption now. And testing is still a great option, but I would assume you have it no matter where you are or for most of Western Canada. That's just the reality now is we have glyphosate-resistant kochia. It's resistant to a few different things. And probably in the last couple of years, if anything, we've seen an uptake in the amount of we see in fields, where we see it in the fields, and probably it's only gotten worse.
Okay, so as we're into spraying season, when should we be scouting for resistant weeds in our fields?
It's always a good opportunity. You're in your fields for other reasons to be checking out. Keep your eye on the weeds. Sometimes we get a little focused on I'm just looking for flea beetles. I'm just looking for flea beetles. But what else is going on in the field? And more time in the field. So at this point, we're kind of seeding is largely starting to wrap up, or pre-burn has probably mostly happened. And, there's been some early in-crop spraying happening already, but probably that's a lot to come. We're kind of in this in-between period where maybe it's a bit of both. So a couple things here. One is to figure out, did my pre-burn work well? Did it actually kill the, there was probably kochia germinates pretty early, so there probably was kochia. Did I kill the kochia with the pre-burn? If I didn't, it's now going to be big. And so job number one would be spray really early. Get in there as fast as you can and look at, depending on what kind of canola system or what kind of crop you're in, it's not just a canola thing, but whatever crop you're in, make sure you're applying the right rate of the herbicide. On label, maybe there's a high rate for bigger kochia. If that kochia is big, it's got to go down now. And the bigger it gets, we kind of lose options too. Some products only go up to this stage or that stage. So did my pre-burn work? Hopefully you had something else in there besides glyphosate. There's a number of different options depending on your crops, and hopefully something else in the mix, and that should be helping with the glyphosate-resistant kochia. So that's job number one, is the big kochia dead, or the stuff that was little a month ago? And then job number two is, what else is coming? Is there a second flush of kochia coming, more emerging? You'll see that with kochia where you get subsequent flushes. How big is it? And, what do I got to do to control it? The other thing would be just maximizing kochia. It's really hairy, lots of dense little hairs on there. So if you have a product that's contact-based, making sure we don't cheat on the water volume. You can get a product that will kill kochia, but if you skimp on the water might be the cheapest thing, the difference between control and not control. And that's not necessarily a resistance thing, but you add in herbicide resistance into a product that kind of works maybe marginally, or you're kind of on the edge of staging, and then suddenly you have big kochia plants that are making 10,000, 15,000 seeds per plant, and you're dealing with them for the rest of the year. And once we kind of miss that window, it's hard to go back.
Are there certain clues in the field, Ian, when you're scouting that indicate whether something might be herbicide resistance as opposed to an applicator error or something along those lines? Maybe not a high enough rate, or those types of other things that could potentially also lead to poor weed control?
Yeah, the first thing is to kind of look at the pattern. If you find a patch of weeds that aren't dead, it's always key to determine why they're not dead. Maybe a nozzle wasn't working and you're going to get the straight row. Maybe it's a triangle right at the edge where, I didn't quite get the auto steer set up quite right, and I left this kind of wedge. Straight lines, generally speaking, are human-made, so probably sprayer error or sprayer mechanical error. Maybe you had too much dust kicked up behind your back tires of your sprayer. All sorts of those things kind of happen. Kochia, generally, where weed resistance in general, you got to look at how the weed distributes. So if it's a wild oats, maybe you're looking at a patch, kind of a roundish spreading patch. Maybe it goes along where they came out the back of the combine. With kochia, you get those classic tumbling plants, and they're going to drop weeds whenever they go. So you might get this kind of, looks like an animal trail throughout the field, kind of a zigzag, or whatever the kochia big plants have gone. You might also get patches of resistance in with kochia, especially in those areas where maybe kochia is thriving in a saline area, or an area where crop competition isn't very good. You might get a patch there. And so even in the patch, you might see, hey, this plant is dead, this plant is not. You might get a mix within that patch. That might be a pretty good indicator that you have resistance. Yeah, depending on when, some good record keeping on what weeds were up. Was the kochia up when you sprayed? How big is it? How realistic is it that the kochia went from not being emerged when you sprayed until now being, 6 or 8 inches or a foot tall? Some of those things on record keeping on when you sprayed, what you sprayed, can really help kind of tease those details out. But then there is always testing to figure out, is it resistance? And like you mentioned, you might see a bit of a mix where plants are showing some symptoms and then regrowing. If you see some sort of damaging symptoms and then new growth, it could be a resistance issue. It could also be that you just gave it a sublethal dose, right? You really made it angry, but now it's regrowing. I'm going to get in that dense hair if we had a light volume or not enough active ingredient in the tank, maybe not enough water volume. Maybe we've got a rain event, any of those things that can happen to kind of reduce the efficacy of a herbicide. So again, those are kind of some tips to look at it, and then knowing that that's a patch we need to deal with now. So what's going to be my next option? And, ideally maybe not using the exact same actives I did last time if you suspect herbicide resistance. And again, glyphosate resistance, if you haven't confirmed you don't have it, I would kind of, at this point, we need to assume we have it.
Do you still recommend testing or sending a sample away if you think you might have it?
Yeah, so if you have a patch that you really think you should have controlled, if it's new to you, it's not a bad idea. It's never, more information around kochia is not a bad thing. If you're seeing large patches, or if you know it's in the neighborhood, you can just assume you have it. So whether, and then take the appropriate steps. Even if you're sending away samples, you think maybe I should send samples away, I would still be taking all the extra steps you want to do. So making sure you're really maximizing the modes of action that work well, any sort of options for tank mixing, anything you can do to control kochia in general. You should probably be doing those anyway, but sometimes that's the extra. Some growers, it is nice to confirm, yeah, this is glyphosate resistant. So when you're going through your chem book for next year, for your next pass, you can say, okay, glyphosate, I need that in the tank for these weeds, but kochia doesn't even count. Just like, we assume that with group 2 resistance, right? If you have a group 2 and a group 9 in your pre-burn, that's great for a lot of weeds. That's 2 modes of action. But for kochia, when we talk 2 modes of action, we talk 2 effective modes of action. So sometimes it's helpful, and we're obviously going to be applying glyphosate for other weed control anyway, so it's still going to be in the mix, but making sure we have something else in the tank is just really critical.
Okay. Just quickly then, Ian, can you take us through the steps of how to submit a kochia sample if we want to find that information out and have that confirmation for next year or later in the growing season?
So there's a couple different labs that will do it depending on what province you're in. So you want to take you want to record keep where the plant is, right? Because you want to know which patch, which area of the field it is, so you can go back and document. And honestly, if you're finding one plant, probably in that local area, given kochia, there's probably more plants that are resistant, but at least you want to know where it came from. That detailing is good. You want to sample and bag the kochia, and you want one plant, or each plant separately if you have a couple. So if you have a range of symptoms, maybe one is perfectly green and healthy, maybe you have one that's showing a little bit of symptomology, but clearly is still survived in application, I would bag those separately and treat them separately. You might end up with a different result. Kind of nice to know what's going on or why that difference is. Is it resistance or is it something else? You gather the couple of top inches of each branch of the plants, snip and throw in the bag. Let's see, usually you want 5 to 8 tips of leaf material. If in doubt, more material is a little better, just to make sure you have enough material for them to run stuff. Throw it in a bag. And then this is for a DNA test. So I know PSI runs a DNA test. And then you can deal with submitting it to them and deal with it from there. There are a few labs where you have to send kochia seeds in. So again, that'd be a kind of a post-harvest, bang out the seeds, send them away. That works too. The DNA test is a little bit quicker if you need to know in. But again, in my mind, quicker is good for information. But if you have big kochia that are not dead and they're producing seed, we need to be managing them regardless of whether they're resistant or not. Clearly something went wrong, and maybe that's, knowing if it's resistant is really helpful for maybe future planning for next year. But in more the immediate concern, are we mowing these plants? Are we desiccating them? How are we going to get this crop? Or how are we even going to get this green biomass to dry down to get through the combine because it's with a fairly healthy looking canola crop? Any of those things, we need to be managing it. So there's kind of the 2 parts of future planning. You want to know if it's resistant. In the future, for right now, you still got to deal with this plant and all of the seeds it's probably producing.
And the wind is showing no signs of abating either on the prairies. And we know that kochia is also a great tumbleweed too. So
it does like it. The only silver lining, or maybe there's some good news in kochia, that it produces a heck of a lot of seeds, but they don't last in the seed bank that long, right? Very short seed bank. So probably 1 to 2 years, you're going to see 90+% of those seeds germinated. So really what I say, if you have a really bad wreck, you had something where something's gone horribly wrong, you got tons of kochia, if you can have 2 years in a row where you have very good kochia control, you can kind of reset. You're not going to get rid of the kochia completely because it tumbles in and, there's always that little bit of percent, only a couple plants escape, they produce seed, but you can kind of reset to maybe a level that's reasonable to deal with. So again, 2 years. So maybe you're spending more money than you're comfortable, or maybe you're doing something you're really, suboptimal, something you're not familiar with, something that's new to you, some other practice. But if you can do that for 2 years, you really can take a wreck field and return it back into a more regular kochia field, which isn't ideal, but that's manageable in a larger number of crops. So that's the one kind of Good thing here is there are some short-term pain for long-term gain with Kochia. So, you could add a seed destructor on the back of your combine. You kill all of those Kochia that are going through the combine. Your combine's a fantastic weed spreader. Winter cereals or something like that that's up and aggressive in spring works pretty well against Kochia. You could be really aggressive on, some fall-applied herbicides and then following up with a couple of modes of action in spring and really being just hitting the herbicides hard with your existing rotation. A higher plant stand can help, especially in those areas. If you have saline or marginal areas, that's quite often where Kochia will thrive. Maybe we should do something different, specifically in those patches. Pull the crop out. I think if I look at a lot of saline areas, even on my own farm, and maybe they're small areas, but we're not actually making money there. Even if I'm growing 20 bushel canola in there, probably I'm not making money there. Should I be doing something else with them? Should I just be leaving them be, putting them into some sort of grass that'll compete the Kochia? Because right now they're just Kochia breeding sites that then tumble across the better, more productive parts of farmland. So lots of things to be thinking about with Kochia, and we have enough multiple modes of action there. We've lost enough actions, and if we look at what's coming predictably from what's happened in the States or other places in the world, we know we're going to lose a few more modes of action. That's just kind of a matter of time. So anything you can do to manage or steward the things you have and deal with the Kochia now will probably pay long-term dividends.
Assume but verify. The verify, a very, very important component of that discussion. Just don't assume that you have resistant Kochia, although it is spreading very, very much and increasing in acreage every single year, as we've seen over the past number. We've also got a wheat school that's talking about this as well with Charles Geddes of AFC out of Lethbridge as well. Resistant Kochia, big problem. They actually had a Kochia survey that Charles and I discussed. So check that out on the Wheat School at wheatschool.com. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday right after this.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Encourage you to check out AgZone Bin Logic. It's a grain monitoring solution designed to transform the way growers manage their grain storage. With streamlined installation, subscription-based pricing, and adaptability to your farm's needs, speak to your local co-op Agro Center expert today with AgZone Bin Logic and see how we can help you protect your yields. Okay, let's get to the top ag news stories of the day. Lots to discuss here today in this segment. So the federal government isn't changing the broad strokes of its capital gains tax hike. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says despite a pressure campaign from the country's top business groups and lead medical association, they say the reform will hurt the economy and drive doctors away. In a Sunday speech at Toronto YMCA outlining the political argument for the tax hike, Ms. Freeland described the $19.4 billion revenue boost over 5 years as one that the rich can afford and that must be done to help everyone else. The government will only detail the specifics of the policy in a motion in the House of Commons today. It will take effect on June 25th. We heard on Friday's show that, it has spurred a lot of business for accounts. A lot of people doing estate freezes, share freezes, a lot of different stuff, a lot of transactions happening, people trying to avoid having to pay the higher capital gains. So even just the announcement has really created a lot of tax revenue for the federal government. But I have had accountants tell me it's a little bit risky to be doing some of these things before we actually get some of the details. So I guess it depends on how strongly you feel or how negative you think this actually could be, whether or not you should do that. In some of her most charged comments yet, Ms. Freeland warned Canada's top 1% of the dire consequences if additional spending on housing, a school food program, and contraceptives doesn't get funded in part through the tax hike. I wish I had the audio for you here, but she weaved in pretty much everything. If we don't move forward with this capital gains increase, Canada literally will not exist in 10 years. That's how I would sum it up. So here's the quote. Do you want to live in a country where those at the very top live lives of luxury, but must do so in gated communities behind ever higher fences using private healthcare and airplanes because the public sphere is so degraded and the wrath of the vast majority of the less privileged compatriots burns so hot? She's getting a little hyperbolic on us. But this still, with the medical associate doctors and the Canadian Federation of Independent Business still very much shouting out very loudly about some of the costs of this increase. Other stories, the Coast Guard plans to reopen the Port of Baltimore Channel following additional dredging, marking the final step in clearing 50,000 tons of debris. The full reopening of the federal channel, expected to bring larger vessels back to Baltimore, is seen as a major milestone. Companies are beginning to schedule shipments to Baltimore, with full recovery anticipated by mid-July. That is great news. Fantastic. Meanwhile, sticking with shipping in the United States, dock workers at America's East Coast and Gulf Coast seaports canceled labor talks that were due to start this week and raised the possibility of a strike later this year at some of the country's biggest trade gateways. The International Longshoremen's Association canceled talks set for Tuesday in Newark, New Jersey, to protest the use of automated machine at some ports, which the union says violates prior labor agreements. So again, this is showing itself again. We saw this with the film strike that happened in LA, right? The scriptwriters, they were on strike for an extended period of time. A big part of that was the use of AI. We've seen this in some of the rail strikes. You know, what can be done with artificial intelligence, what can't, and robotics coming up here as well. So this is a continual thing that keeps showing itself in the relationship between the company and the unions and what is allowed and what is not allowed. Ukraine grain production exports are going to fall sharply this year. So Ukraine's 2024 grain production is forecast to fall 7 million metric tons. It's about 11.7% from last year. It's going to fall to about 52.8 million metric tons. That's according to APK Inform, who's the analyst. Now, that includes 26.8 million metric tons of corn to 20 million metric tons of wheat and 4.5 million metric tons of barley. APK Inform's forecast is close to the Ag Ministry's 52.4 million metric ton projection. Boosted by the popularity of forage policies, crop insurance coverage exceeds 500 million acres in 2023 in the United States, marking the highest level ever. Enrollment to crop insurance has surged 85% since 2016, according to USDA data. Taxpayer-subsidized crop insurance, the largest USDA agricultural support, is projected to cost $125 billion over 10 years, significantly higher than the $61 billion for traditional crop subsidies. Farmers pay roughly 38% of the insurance premium in the U.S., with the government taxpayers covering the rest. So a bit of a question for you is, do you feel that is sustainable? We had a conversation about this on Friday. We were at the CAFA meeting, and you heard the broadcast from there. And once we went off the air, we had a bit of a Q&A session, okay? And we talked about a little bit. There's some questions from the audience in terms of the taxpayers' willingness to pay this portion of the premium for farmers over the longer term. Now, it's the premium for crop subsidy or crop insurance is subsidized in Canada. It is also subsidized in the U.S. There's going to be differences from province to province and state to state, of course. But this is something we've had for a long time. And the question is it sustainable into the future? Is there a willingness for the taxpayer to participate in paying that, a good chunk of the premium in the future? Or should it be more of a user pay situation where the farmer pays a larger portion of it? Some would say that would almost make crop insurance unaffordable. It would also make it so it would actually end up increasing ad hoc programming longer term if people aren't participating in the crop insurance in the first place. Now, some would also argue that in order to qualify for some of the ad hoc programming that is out there based on some sort of disaster, you should have had to participate in crop insurance in the first place, showing that you had done your sort of due diligence and not just relying on ad hoc programming. There's a lot of different points of view here. I'm not sure which one is right, but it is definitely a debate I think we're going to hear more of in Canada and the United States going forward. So I'd love your perspectives on that and how you feel about it. And just try to take your farmer rancher hat off for a second and think about it from all the different points of view to kind of build on that discussion. Also, a big news today is from a political standpoint over in Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced he would dissolve the country's parliament and call for new elections following a significant defeat in the European Parliament vote. Macron's party was decisively beaten by Marine Le Pen's far-right party, reflecting voter dissatisfaction with the current state of the affairs in France. This sentiment was echoed in Germany, where Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats experienced their worst result ever, highlighting the broader discontent with mainstream political parties in Europe. And speaking of elections, highly encourage you to go to RealAgriculture.com and see my opinion column from Friday talking about how the Mexican election, the results that came out last week, how they impact what we could see in the next two elections in Canada and the U.S., which those elections have to happen before this July 1st, 2026 deadline on whether or not countries want to renegotiate, review, go through with a fine-tooth comb, reopen, however you want to put this, the USMCA CUSMA trade agreement. And we know one of the players because Mexico had their election last week, and we're still yet to find out who will be the leader of the U.S. and who will be the leader of Canada. And there's a lot of course, you think about Biden versus Trump, there's a lot of differences, but there's also a lot of similarities when it comes to trade policy, where it's not very clear in Canada in terms of what Pierre Poilievre, if he is the next prime minister, what is exactly his plan on trade? We haven't heard a lot of policies when it comes from Mr. Poilievre on what a conservative government would do in regards to trade. They've been kind of quiet on it, not providing a lot of guidance. I have guesses, but they have not provided clarity on some of that. So we also have a great new Frontlines podcast. It's myself and Jacob Shapiro of Cognitive Investments talking about this Mexican election and what it means for Mexico from their point of view. So really encourage you to check that out. A lot of people providing some feedback and enjoying that episode of myself and Jacob talking about Mexico. But there's a lot of issues. Like you think about the GMO-free white corn from the U.S. into Mexico. That's a contentious topic. Does that actually get fixed now that there's a new leader in Mexico? Jacob doesn't necessarily think so. So we're going to hear, you need to listen to it. It's very, very informative. Good stuff. Okay. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also, of course, find us across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. And of course, we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.